Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to show you guys. This is not the knife that we're reviewing today, but it is an absolutely massive overbuilt knife, nearly 1/4 inch blade stock, big thick titanium. This is the Miguron Arma. And this is its bigger, thicker, longer, older brother, the Miguron Arma XL. And it is an absolute beast of a knife. Far more than 1/4 inch on the blade stock thickness, and that is DLC coated M390, much thicker titanium. It's been darkened. This is, in a lot of ways, this is kind of like the dream overbuilt knife. This is my favorite type of ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The companies who make these know that they're ridiculous, and they know that they're attracting an audience of people who knows it's ridiculous and loves it because it's ridiculous. I think there's a lot of people out there that assume that companies like PMP and Miguron and Medford and whoever are like making these overbuilt knives and sort of advertising them as I don't know about Medford, but you know, Maxace, PMP, and Miguron. A lot of them assume that these companies are like falsely advertising them as being these overly or aggressively durable or superior products to standard, proper geometry folding knives. And that's not the case at all. I don't know where, I think people just come to that conclusion. But in reality, they're just fun, and they know that people enjoy this object that's supposed to be a knife at base is supposed to be a convenient cutting tool. And by making the geometry so ridiculous, it's kind of like it's irony, right? I mean, it's worse at doing what it's supposed to do. But what's funny is that a lot of these companies, especially Miguron, has perfected this craft so well that there's another funny layer to this, is that it actually does function pretty well if you decide to carry and use it. We'll get into all of that. But I want to thank Miguron for being willing to create this stuff. They always ask me, like, do you think people would even care? And I said, there are definitely people who love this stuff. I even was behind the name between the Miguron Arma and the Miguron Geddon. That was my idea to name them like that. I thought that was kind of an interesting, word combination. It just was fun for people who are interested in this stuff. But I want to thank Miguron for being willing to make stuff that's fun and interesting in a world of pocket knives where the vast majority of stuff is just very, very boring. So thank you very much, Miguron, and also for sending this in so that I can share it with everybody. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and measure this guy. This was fun, but I'll tell you right now, it was fun, but it was very inconvenient to carry. Like, I think it's cool, and this is the type of knife that I like to get out and flip and just sort of enjoy, right? It is not the type of knife that I would want to dedicate to, like my actual EDC. I know that there are people out there who do carry these big, crazy brick knives, and they love it and it puts a smile on their face, and I say, hey, knock yourself out, do what makes you happy. But after a couple of days of this, I was like, yeah. It's not the most comfortable thing to carry around. So the overall length of this one, the Arma XL, is 9 inches. The blade length is 4 inches, and the cutting edge is 3.75. Let's do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the Cold Steel 8010 and the Demco 80-20.5. The Cold Steel 8010 is a big knife, and I've got titanium scales on this guy, so that makes this is really like, I hand this to people and people go, oh my gosh, right? This is much bigger. It's humorously massive, right? So if you're carrying around an 80, if you're like, I EDC a titanium 8010, right? I know, no problem with this big guy. This is another step and a half up, okay? It's much larger. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2, if I can find it. The Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. This is probably the most Spyderco-y looking knife. A lot of people say it looks like Medford meets, I can't remember, whoever makes the Stinger XL. I can't remember who that is. But yeah, kind of, it has it looks like a whale shark, right? That's what it looks like. It looks like a knife that's also kind of a shark. But it definitely has that look. Kind of looks like a Spyderco Shaman, massively overbuilt, right? And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. I think you guys get it. It's really big. Now, how's the action? The action is superb. One of the things that makes this knife so enjoyable is the same thing that makes the Max Ace Hephaestus enjoyable as a big overbuilt knife, but this is way bigger. This knife has a flipper tab and detent combination that somehow actually feels perfect. Usually with these big overbuilt knives, no matter how heavy they make the detent, it just doesn't feel right. This is probably I can't help but laugh. Flipping this thing is a hilarious experience. There's so much momentum. I honestly think flipping this knife, like if I accidentally got my finger in the way of this, I feel like I might break my finger. Like there's so much blade coming out, but the flipper tab allows you to get leverage on what is legitimately a heavy detent. You can also use this slot to easily reverse flick the knife. It shouldn't be this easy to operate, but it is. You have so much room in there to disengage that lock bar, that ridiculously thick. It's got to be 1/4 inch slabs of titanium. Disengaging it, no problem. Get your fingers out of the way. There is a little bit of an area that feels like it could be double clutch, but right about here, the detent ball's up on the face of the blade and you can get it to fall, right? I would recommend not doing that. I would recommend closing this knife like this, because while this blade is excessively thick, it is far thicker than a 1/4 inch. I know people are going to compare this to the Praetorian tie from Medford. Not only is this thicker than the T, it is way thicker than the Praetorian tie. This knife makes that look like a baby knife. It's huge. While it is a very thick blade with thick geometry, I have to stress, the factory cutting edge is way sharper and way slicier than you would ever guess. Now, it's still a big, thick, piece of material. You don't want to break down a cardboard box or something like this. But yeah, it's very, very sharp. It's definitely not a joke. So the action is insanely impressive. The whole thing is built so well. It's close to double clutch, not quite. Very easy to manipulate. Very, very fun to deploy. This is a knife that will put a smile on your face and literally anybody you hand it to. It's almost like this is the knife that you hand the guy. There's always a guy in your life he's into knives, but not at this level. And whatever he's carrying is like the coolest thing in the whole world. It's always a CRKT M16. It's always that. And that's not a bad knife at all. But those guys who are just like, yeah, I know a lot about knives. And what they mean is that they go to Cabela's a lot, right? They go to Bass Pro Shop a lot, or they frequent whatever their local firearm store is. And they carry the same common surface level brands that we're all super familiar with, right? And, they are overly prideful of the CRKT M16 or the equivalent. This is the type of knife that you hand that person just because it's so overwhelmingly huge and aggressive. It's just funny, right? But anyways, it's almost worth it just to see the interaction or just to see the expression on somebody like that, their face. But anyways, the action is really, really fun and very, very impressive. It's just, it's because it's ridiculous. Let's do the carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. I can almost put the Para 3 inside of this. So this is not a comfortable thing to carry at all. There's just no universe where whatever extra benefit you gain here, which people always argue durability. These overbuilt knives are not that much more durable than a regular frame lock. I mean, yeah, you have more material and there's more surface contact on lockup. You have a thicker blade, so it would take more to break the blade, but you're far more likely to damage this knife at its weakest point than ever doing anything to the blade. And the weakest point is going to be the pivot. I would say the knife's ability to withstand impact damage to the pivot is probably no more than a standard folding knife. So you're not really gaining anything, in my opinion. It's as strong as any other frame lock. you're just making the cutting geometry worse, and you're making the whole carry experience more cumbersome, right? But I've always said that in case anybody was curious, that's the conclusion that I have come to carrying this stuff. But let's go ahead and do length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. It's huge. It's gigantic. It's not gonna be a comfortable experience unless you have exclusively carried knives like these in the past, and that's just your thing, right? Blade material, DLC, truly DLC coated, M390, hardened to 59 to 61, which in some ways is like, it's a bummer, but also, even if it is up there at 60 to 62, where I like to see it, the geometry is not suited for performance cutting. And M390 performs best not only at that hardness, but at a much, much thinner geometry, right? So it's up there. I guess you could say what you want about the HRC. I would not call this a performance object. I'm not really taking this seriously, right? It weighs 11.5 ounces. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. Let's measure that blade stock thickness. So this guy, this much smaller, the little brother, is actually far closer to the dimensions of the Medford Praetorian tie, the thicker one. This thinner guy here has a blade stock thickness of nearly 1/4 inch, 242 thousandths. And then the titanium actually is also very, very thick at 190 thousandths, right? This guy, the blade stock thickness on the Arma XL is 312 thousandths. And then I bet you that titanium is 230, 240, something like that. Now it's about 220 thousandths. So also approaching 1/4 inch. It's just stupid. And if you're wondering, this is the Miguron Geddon. So we have the Arma XL and the Geddon. Now the Geddon looks like it's thicker, but that's because the edges of this blade are beveled. So you're really only seeing the highlighted portion, not seeing the full thickness. But both the Geddon and the Arma XL, they have the same blade stock thickness. So we'll come in here and do the exact same thing just so that you can see. Whoops. Got to get it right. 312 thousandths. So it is exactly the same. They're also, I don't think I measured them correctly when I unboxed it. They're also exactly the same overall length. And the camera's at an angle, so it's making the Arma look a little bit longer, right? If we flip-flop them like this, it's going to make the Geddon look a little bit longer. They are the same exact length. Somebody asked me in the comments, does that mean, because the Geddon, the standard Geddon, they don't call this the Geddon XL, they just call it the Geddon. Is Miguron planning on doing an even larger knife, a Geddon XL? Guess you'll have to stay tuned for that one. But for right now, anyways, we can conclude knife big knife. Let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. Is this a comfortable knife to hold? Yes, in the most humorous way, in the way that it's filling out the hand. It's just a lot to hang on to, but it's also super comfortable. All these edges here, even here, everything's knocked down, right? Look at how much chamfering and beveling there is. It's all just really, really cozy. The jimping feels good. The choke up position feels awesome. This is a knife that using it is cumbersome and clunky and slow. Holding it is a joy. Just holding it, you're like, oh yeah, this is the type of knife you go, man, you can just do some work with this. But you could. It's just the work isn't going to be fun because you're pushing so much blade through whatever it is you're cutting. Using this and only this to break down a thick cardboard box, yeah, you're probably going to be putting 20 to 30% more effort into every single cut, right? So the more resistance you're going to get from the material, the more that's really going to translate. And a thinner blade, knives are supposed to cut. That's their primary function. They're not supposed to be hammers, projectiles, pry bars. They're not supposed to do that, right? A lot of people say, oh, this is a knife you can pry with. Well, okay. You'll still mess up the blade. You're probably not going to snap that tip. I mean, look at that. There's no way, even with M390. But you probably will damage the pivot. Also, wouldn't hammer with it, anything like that. So really, the extra thickness, you can you can imagine some benefit there, but really it's just heavy. It is fun though, even though, I get in that small period of time where I was carrying it, every time I had to use a knife or something, I'd get this out and I'd be like, this would be way easier with a thinner, smaller knife. But I still was just enjoying the fact that it was so comically huge that I just loved any opportunity to get it out. It was just so ridiculous. What I didn't like was putting it back in my pocket. Getting it out, flipping it, fun. Putting it back in my pocket and having it constantly tugging on my pocket, no, it's huge. It's way too heavy, right? Now over time, if this is your only EDC, the amount of enjoyment you get from pulling this thing out and flipping it, it's going to decrease over time. So you're really going to be left with the fact that it doesn't cut as well as a smaller, thinner knife, and it is ridiculously heavy. That's what you're gonna, that set on pretty quickly after a couple of days. I'm just being honest here, but it is fun. And if your favorite part of the knife world is the overbuilt part of the knife world, then yeah, you will definitely enjoy this. I love that Miguron keeps it pretty simple. We just have the logo right here, nothing on the blade, beautiful finish. It's kind of a satiny DLC. And we have M390 back here. I do like the texturing here. I think it would have been cool if they had done the contouring like they did with the standard Arma 2, but they didn't, and I don't know that it matters too much. I mean, this is so much material. It's absolutely insane how much titanium is on. I mean, there's enough titanium here for probably 3 premium knives. Absolutely. If you were to take the $200 premium pyrite from CJRB, there's definitely enough material here to make at least 3 of those, right? So I did keep that in mind. So at some point, the material cost really does, matter a lot. An absolutely titanic backspacer, which I have to imagine the sole purpose of is to protect you from the majority of the blade, because I could easily get my finger in there. In fact, I can touch the initial part of the sharpened edge right there. They had to stop because the blade gets so close to it. They keep running it back, and then the blade's just going to run into the backspacer every single time. So unfortunately, there is a little bit of sharpened bit sticking out right there, so you have to be wary of that. Big, just crazy thick backspacer. Absolutely insane. Big, crazy pocket clip resting on a bald spot, so in and out of the pocket was actually pretty easy. It was just the weight of the object. This is the type of thing that's so big that if you use it as like a blunt force, like, well, if you were to use this as a non-lethal, the impact of the back end of that would be an awful thing to take to the forehead. Let's put it that way. I do like the styling here. This is neat. It makes a lot of people think of Medford. Yeah, that's true. Medford does like to put half ovals on his knives. That's not too much of a specific styling thing, for people to scream copy, but sometimes people believe that people can own part of shapes, which is hilarious, but what are you going to do, Yeah, I have to imagine that these were inspired by the Medford aesthetic, and then they, continued on to kind of do their own thing here. Nice texturing, absolutely beautiful, huge. We didn't do the hardware check. I knew I was forgetting something. Let me get out my tools. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use in this channel. I'm pretty sure the pivot is bigger now. Oh, it's much larger. It's even bigger than a T10. Let's leave that T10 out here. I believe this pivot is a T15. Thank you, Miguron. Thank you. If you're going to do an overbuilt knife, just do oversized hardware. The body screws are T10, and then the pocket clip screws are probably T8, which is fine. I wish that all the hardware matched or was at least close, like maybe just 2 different ones. But there's also never any reason to take off the pocket clip because you can't flip it over to the other side. So T8 on the pocket clip screws and also T8 on the lock bar insert. But I love the T15 here and the T10 for the body. Actually very, very simple to take apart. So that's actually really, really cool. Oh, this is so out of place. Everything in I never get these bigger sized ones out, so now everything is totally out of whack. Is this that's a T9, so we need to put that right here. I don't know why I had that messed up. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. beautifully comfortable to hang on to. Really like that choke up spot. It's a nice roomy forward choil. Here's the plunge grind. That is not going to make people happy who plan on. I feel like what would be a good plunge grind on this? You know, like if you're going to use, this is going to be your only knife. You're going to dedicate to it and you're going to resharpen this. Well, yeah, you're going to run into a problem here. putting it mildly, right? So yeah, can be used 100%. You could dedicate to this and it will hold up. It's just not going to be fun to maintain. It's not going to be fun to cut, dense materials with. So yeah, I got to keep saying that. So I think it's also just so people understand that I understand, right? Anyways, no lanyard hole. Imagine that. In and out of the pocket, we talked about that. I think the pocket clip is fine, not super special. I do like this darkened look on the titanium. It will snail trail up. I bumped into something with this. I don't know if it's going to pick it up on camera, but I have a little tiny mark somewhere. Where did it go? Well, I did have a little tiny mark on it. Oh, here it is. It's so faint. I'm not even sure that the camera is going to pick it up. I think you can kind of see right there. You bump into stuff, it's definitely going to show, right? DLC is going to take a lot more to scratch that. That is very, very, very scratch resistant. Stop pin is absolutely massive, as it should be, because there is a lot of force coming around here and slamming into it. So definitely good that they did a big oversized stop pin. A little bit of shouldering there. Not a hint of movement. This is a huge, huge frame lock, right? You should never pound on the spine at all, and there's not really any normal thing you would do with a knife where that impact would be considered normal use, right? But if you do get the blade stuck and you're wiggling around and maybe there's some pressure on the spine, I would say it is extremely unlikely that lock bar would disengage. Should you baton with it? I wouldn't. I will stress this. I don't think you should baton with any folding knife, but if you're going to do it, something like the Cold Steel Triad Lock makes way more sense. I think you should use a fixed blade for batoning. I don't think a thick blade geometry on a pocket knife that's backed up by a frame lock, no matter how they do the relief cut, I don't think that's a good idea at all. I think you're asking for trouble, and no matter how durable the folding knife is, it is still a folding knife. So I think at the end of the day, that's pretty stupid. But you can think whatever you want. Anyways, there's the total engagement there. It doesn't look like very much, but you can see how they've cut it here. So it's actually probably about like this. And that's going to be maybe 15 to 20% of the total amount of surface right here, which would be like 50% lockup on any other folding knife. So I have to stress again, it doesn't look like a lot of contact, but it is a lot of contact for sure. And it's just going to keep locking in further and further and further. That does double as the over travel stop, by the way. Very close to double clutch, but it's not there. No pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent in here. Pretty heavy detent. And it has actually remained perfectly centered the entire time I've had it. How much is this knife? $350. That's a lot of money for a pocket knife. It is. The vast majority of people are not going to spend $350 on this pocket knife. But let's compare realistically with other overbuilt knives. We don't compare this knife to other M390 and titanium knives, right? We don't say, but I could get titanium and M390 for $200 from this company. Sure you can. At 1/3 the thickness of the materials, right? Well, I don't need my materials to be that thick. You're right, you don't. Nobody does. But that's what this is. So we compare it with other big overbuilt knives. PMP and Maxace being Chinese companies, every now and then Riot. Chinese companies that make overbuilt knives periodically. How are their prices? I would say the closest, like Maxace sometimes will do an overbuilt product for $400, $450. PMP is always higher. They do, definitely have the Alpha Beast, the super duper thick one, but even like their Kodiak, their M390 Kodiak was $400 and it was way smaller, way thinner. They had the Grizzly, but that was D2 in titanium, and I want to say that they still wanted $300 or something for that. So Miguron continues to be far and away the most impressive company building these hyper premium Overbuilt knives. They also are the second thickest as far as production knives go, with the thickest being the PMP Alpha Beast at like 0.4 or something like that. But I can tell you, not only is PMP seeking to trump that, but Miguron is also seeking to trump that and go even thicker in the future. So comparing to other knives, other overbuilt knives at $350, the only knives that are considered overbuilt and less expensive, utilizing the exact same materials. I know someone's going to go, Cold Steel SR1 Light is only $40. Okay, that's not the same thing though. That's a 1/5 of an inch thick. That's injection mold plastic, right? And it's a Trident. We're not looking at the same thing at all. I mean, if you just want a hyper durable, pretty thick knife, like, yeah, go for that because it's like $40. But titanium and a premium blade material and overbuilt or oversized everything, Miguron's actually the lowest price, with the standard Arma coming in at $300, and this guy surprisingly being $350. I mean, this is way bigger. Way bigger. There's enough material here to make 3 premium titanium and M390 knives, all costing at a good price about $200 each. That's $600, right? This is insane. Like, the amount of joy. $350 is a lot of money for a knife. This is a very inexpensive titanium and M390 overbuilt knife. I thought for sure that they were going to charge $400 for this. So, very specifically, if you are somebody who loves big, thick, overbuilt premium knives, I absolutely recommend this knife to you. You will love this, or the Geddon, whatever. Or if it's too thick, go with the Arma. You will love this. It'll put the biggest smile on your face. For literally everyone else, no. No, this makes no sense, obviously. Right? This is a fun thing for a very specific, it's a niche group of people, or a niche interest within a community of people that already are, it's already a niche interest community. This is a niche within a niche, right? Super fun, ridiculous. It gives you that sense of, ugh! And your friends will think it's hilarious and really cool too. This is the type of thing that's just fun. If everybody in your group's got a pocket knife, this is always fun to, to bring to the barbecue, for sure. I will link this in the description. It is not going in my recommended knives playlist, but it is definitely going in my favorite knives of all time playlist, just because I love stuff like this. I will be keeping this knife and adding it to my permanent collection. I absolutely love it. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.